Welcome to Poetry Lockdown. We're up to day 96. As you have probably noticed, for the last really week and a half or so, I've really been intentional about trying to highlight poems by Black poets that I especially admire. And I have an incredibly beautiful, really hard to read poem. I'll just say that up front. And when I say hard to read, I mean it's emotionally taxing. I think it's a really important poem to read, especially for white poets and artists like myself. So I'll just say that up front. Terrance Hayes is the poet, fantastic poet. The book that I'm getting this from is Wind in a Box. It's an incredible collection. And the poem's called A Postcard from Okemah. Okemah is actually how you pronounce it. I looked it up. And I think in order to really understand the poem and get its maximum impact, you do need to know a little background. So the poem is what's called an ekphrastic poem. I did one of those early on, Rosemary Winslow's, on a Caravaggio painting, and basically that means the poem draws its inspiration from an image. And so the image is a pretty horrific one. So two African Americans, a mother and a son, were lynched in 1911. The backstory, which I've linked you to, so you have the opportunity to find out more detail on your own, is basically this: the woman who was lynched, her husband had stolen a cow, I think, and was going to use the meat. The sheriff of the town brought his men over there. There was a gun that the family had, and the young son had it, and the mother was trying to wrest the gun away from him, and it accidentally went off. And I think the sheriff or one of his men was shot and died. And so the husband of the family wanted to take responsibilities. It's no one's fault but my own, but they took the wife and son into jail, and then the townspeople took them out. They raped the wife and then lynched both of them. And what was even more horrific is that, as it was the case for many lynchings, there was a crowd of people who witnessed this and watched this, and someone even took a photograph, and that was a photograph that was then sent as a postcard. So that's the background for this poem, and like I said, it's pretty horrific. I linked you to the article, but yeah, just a warning. I mean, there are images that are disturbing to say the least. But I think this poem is exceptional for the way that it reckons with the history, which we are trying to reckon with right now. And Terrance Hayes can help, I think. Postcard from Okemah by Terrance Hayes. Turned from the camera's eye, hovering between river and bridge, the hung woman looks downstream, and snagged in the air beside her, the body of her young son. They are tassels on a drawn curtain. They are the closed eyes of the black boy who will find them while leading his cow to the riverbank. They are the bells that will clamor around the animal's neck when it lowers its head to drink. The boy dangles in midair like a hooked fish, his pants hanging from his ankles like a tail fin. On the bridge, women pose in aprons and feathered bonnets. The men wear wide-brimmed hats with bow ties or dungarees. There are three small girls leaning against the railing, and a boy nestled beneath the wing of his father's arm. I count 67 citizens and children staring at what must have been a flash and huff of smoke. The photographer must have stood on a boat deck, though from this angle he could have been standing on the water with his arms outstretched. He must have asked them to smile at the camera, and later scrawled his copyright and condolences on the back of the postcards he made for the murdered man's friends. The Negroes got what would have been due to them under the process of the law, the sheriff said. His deputy had been shot when the posse searched the suspect's cabin for stolen meat. To protect her son, the mother claimed she'd fired the gun. The mob dragged them both from the jail, bound in saddle string. If you look closely, you can see a pattern of tiny flowers printed on her dress. You can see an onlooker's hand opened, as if he's just released a dark bouquet. Now all of Okemah, Oklahoma is hushed. Now even the children in attendance are dead. After that day in 1911, it did not rain again. To believe in God, this is the reckoning I claim. It is a Monday morning years too late. All the rocking chairs and shopping carts, all the mailboxes and choir pews are empty. I cannot hear the psalms of salvation or forgiveness, the gospel of mercy. I cannot ask who is left more disfigured, the ones who are beaten or the ones who beat, the ones who are hung or the ones who hang. I'm awed by this poem, A-W-E-D. This poem hushes me. At the same time, I want to honor it by saying why I admire it so much, so I will try to say something brief. I'm struck by the attentiveness of the poet, how the poet is at the beginning. Hayes, as a poet, is able to almost submerge or immerse himself totally in description, in absolutely faithful, precise description. And then, if you look at that line, all of a sudden about 5 or 6 stanzas in, there's the I count, and you realize, oh my God, this is a poet from now who's, sort of re-experiencing this. That move and that shift from he speaking with the individual I voice and then shifting back, right? He actually enters into the consciousness of the racist sheriff, right? And includes that quote, right? The Negroes got would have been due to them under the process of the law. That movement gives a comprehensiveness to this poem, which it really needs and deserves for the magnitude of what it is he's describing. I mean, he's equal to the task of this horrific event, of this reckoning. And then really the last thing that I have to say is just the ending of this poem is incredible. Those lines that for me feel like the shifts or turning points. I mean, I think there's multiple shifts or turning points in this poem, but he says a line that clearly we know is like scientifically false, but there's a deep poetic truth to it. He says, after that day in 1911, it did not rain again. To believe in God, this is the reckoning I claim. Something this horrific, it boggles the imagination, this denial of humanity that's inscribed in this poem, and in a real sense inscribed in the history of our country. He lays both of those side by side. His refusal to say this cannot be, and yet this is. And that he's able also to state at the end, I can't even ask who is more disfigured by this horrific act of racism. And his willingness and ability to lay both of those side by side, for me is just incredible. The poem is a masterpiece, and I hope more and more people read it and really engage with it deeply. So thank you for engaging with this difficult poem, and thank you, Terrance Hayes, for writing it.